Chapter 1086. Focus Fire. Dragon Swordsman, the level 75 wild boss of Dragon Highlands, was their target today. By now the 8 level 75 wild bosses had been completely figured out by the players. Out of the 8, there were 6 that were each experts of single class type. The other 2 were amalgamations of 3 different class types. Figuring out the class of a boss wasn't just to make the battle easier, but also to understand the rewards that the boss could drop. The drops from the boss would naturally coincide more with the class of the boss. Dragon Swordsman was one of the 6 class type experts. His class type was obviously the Swordsman class, if his name was anything to go by. There would be events that signaled Dragon Swordsman's respawn, and the guilds that noticed these events would naturally prepare to welcome the boss beforehand. That was what Thunderclap had planned, and also what Happy had planned. It was just unfortunate that they bumped into each other. They exchanged blows, but tried their best to preserve their strength. It hadn't been a minute since the Dragon Swordsman had spawned. Attack! The 2 teams simultaneously received the order, but no one charged towards Dragon Swordsman. All of Thunderclap's players focused on Yishu's Battle Mage without any hesitation. All of Happy's players focused on Xiao Shikin's mechanic without hesitation. Having hundreds of people focus on one target was just in theory. In reality, the DPS methods of healers were limited. The melee classes needed to switch places as they attacked, which had a method to it because they couldn't all attack the same target all at once, and ranged attacks needed space. Gunners needed a path for their bullets while mages needed a good angle to cast spells from. The 2 teams had only just received the order to focus fire and hadn't had the time to arrange a formation for attacking and positioning. This wave of attacks was rather hapdash. Perhaps it was enough against normal players, but Yishu and Xiao Shikin were both at the top of the glory scene, and the top of the top at that. Battle Mage, Mechanic, the 2 figures weaved in and out of the attacks, parrying the strikes from melee classes, and dodging the blasts from ranged classes. When they did receive damage, it was only the smallest loss possible at the time. Both sides were stunned. The offensive launched by the other side made them feel like they were looking in a mirror. They all turned their views and saw 2 characters running around desperately. One wave rush, even their yells were exactly the same. The 2 sides had come across each other, but the battle between them hadn't erupted yet. Both sides were focused on accomplishing their orders and had sort of switched places. After all, Happy's players were in a position where it was easier to hit Yishu's Battle Mage while Thunderclap was in a position closer to Xiao Shikin's mechanic. In that moment, people from the 2 guilds had mixed together and it was hard to tell who was friend and who was foe. From the overall situation, it looked more like Yishu and Xiao Shikin were on the same side. How merciless! A focused attack like this wasn't easy to deal with, even for a god like Yishu. While parrying, his battle mage managed to throw in a few neutral chasers and rely on these chasers to increase movement speed. Yishu's battle mage sprinted across the field, quickly looking around, spotting a massive tree root lying across the ground. He charged wildly towards it and jumped over the root, immediately crouching and finding cover against the ranged firepower. In almost the exact same moment, he saw a mechanic using accelerator, practically rolling on the ground as he swerved over from the other side of the tree root. The 2 characters looked at each other. Ha ha ha. The 2 couldn't help but laugh. I'll draw their attention, you all go and steal the boss. The team chat of the 2 guilds once again flashed with the same message at the same time. Then, Xiao Shikin's mechanic flicked his hand and threw a grenade, while sneakily setting up a mechanical seeker. Yishu was even more vicious. His battle mage directly activated Dragon Breaks the Ranks and charged at Xiao Shikin. Grenade. Mechanical seeker. These skills couldn't stop the momentum of Dragon Breaks the Ranks. Xiao Shikin quickly jumped back thrice, barely dodging the attack, but Yishu had already completed his attack. Low-leveled skills like Dragon Tooth and Sky Strike flew out. Mechanics did have some close combat ability, but it was nothing compared to battle mages. Yishu naturally didn't want to drag this out either. He hadn't forgotten that Thunderclap's army had their eyes set on him. When Xiao Shikin swerved around the tree roots from the other side, he had already been prepared to keep fleeing. But then he saw that the army that had been hunting him down had switched targets. Yishu was stunned. At the same time, Xiao Shikin also realized that Happy, who were hunting him down before, had gone elsewhere. In that moment, next to the tree root, the leaders of both sides stood there alone. Caw-caw. A crow landed on the tree roots, shuffling its feet for a moment before flying away after losing interest. Ha, Xioa Shiken said. They all left. Why aren't you leaving yet? Yi Shu asked. I wanna leave, Xiao Shiken said. This wasn't a courtesy. The current distance between them meant that battle mages had the advantage. Leaving gave Xiao Shiken the advantage. Pulling away meant that the mechanic could gain the upper hand. Then I'll escort you. Yi Shu didn't say any more, striking out. This time Xiao Shiken didn't fight for his life, especially the last knockback attack. He just stood there and took it. With the mechanic sent flying, Yi Shu understood what Xiao Shiken wanted, not bothering to pursue. Instead, he immediately ran towards his own team. Xiao Shiken did the same. When his mechanic quick recovered, he immediately got his feet and headed towards Guild Thunderclap. What's the situation? Yi Shu quickly returned to his team, asking for the current battle situation. It's very lively, Wu Chen said. In reality, he was the leader when it came to happy in the online game. Of course, with Yi Shu here to help, he would naturally give up command. Any club guild would do the same. Yi Shu looked around. As expected, it was very lively. With Dragon Swordsman's spawn method having warnings, it gave the players plenty of time to prepare. Usually, by the time he spawned, several guilds would have already arrived. It wasn't like other bosses that would usually have been snuck away by one guild and the others who arrived later would chase after it. Right now, the teams from Blue Rain, Tiny Herb, and 100 Blossoms had arrived, and their scouts said that Void's people were on their way. There were only 8 level 75 wild bosses in total, and their class characteristics were exceptionally obvious. Each guild would naturally place importance on them in accordance to their own needs. Dragon Swordsman was a part of the Swordsman class. There was no need to explain Team Blue Rain and their 2 Blade Masters. Team Tiny Herb had Lu Xiaobi's Blade Master, while Team 100 Blossoms had Yu Feng's Berserker. As for the rapidly approaching Team Void, the Ghost Blade duo were clearly of the Swordsman class as well. It wasn't very feasible that one team would have all 24 classes, but having all 6 class types was rather common. However, characters would have different levels of importance within their team. Of the 4 guilds, Blue Rain, 100 Blossoms, and Void had swordsmen as their core classes. As for Tiny Herb, their swordsman was just a level of importance below that. Then there was Happy, who had Chao Yifan's Ghostblade and Yi Shu's Unspecialized. In comparison, Thunderclap seemed more like a bystander. The Blade Master in their team was Zhang Qi's character, and this rookie hadn't even become a core player yet. The teams of the guilds had all gathered and Dragon Swordsman seemed like the huge bonfire on Bonfire Night. Currently, no one had gone up to him yet. They were all looking at one another and waiting for the right time to break the stalemate. Quick, you go up and light a fire first, Yi Shu messaged Xiao Shiken on QQ. You first, Xiao Shiken replied. Hurry up. What are you waiting for? Yi Shu and then went and messaged Huang Xiaoshan. Holy F***CK, where are you? Huang Xiaoshan immediately replied back. He didn't use many words, but used a bunch of emojis instead, almost 30 of them. God GXC, hurry up. You guys look like a team of janitors. Hurry up and come out and sweep. Yi Shu then went to bother Tiny Herb's Wang GXC. There's plenty of time. Wang GXC was very calm. Tiny Herb did have quite a few witches, and they were all holding brooms. Janitors? Wang GXC looked around. Come on. Comrade Li Zan, don't blame me for not reminding you. Ghost's boundaries have to be set early. If you throw down a bunch now, you'll definitely come out on top. Yi Shu then sent a message to Void's Li Zan. Are you trying to fool Ghosts asterisk? Li Zan replied. I'm not joking. But we're not even there yet. Really? Then you don't need to come. It's already finished, seriously. Tiny Herb's janitors are already sweeping up the remains, Yi Shu said. Ha 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 ha, Li Zan sent back. There was also 100 Blossoms. Yi Shu glanced over his QQ friend list, but didn't immediately see anyone. He wasn't very close to 100 Blossoms Yu Feng. Has anyone else not arrived yet? Yi Shu yelled. Old Yi, where are you? Come out, I hear your voice. Blade Master stepped out of the crowd on Blue Rain's side, swinging around his sword and showing off. It's Huang Xiaoshan, quick, don't hesitate. Kill him, Yi Shu yelled. Boom boom boom. The guilds really didn't hesitate. They were all throwing attacks at Huang Shaoxin's Blade Master, and most of them were ranged attacks. For a moment, it looked like Blue Rain was having a fireworks party. Yi Shu, fuck you. I'm going to kill you. Huang Shaoxin ran around, desperately dodging the attacks. Blue Rain's entire team had to back away as well. All the attacks were focused on Huang Shaoxin's Blade Master, but they weren't that accurate, especially not the Aoi ones. Amongst these, Tiny Herb's members were the most outrageous. All the witches threw a bunch of lava flasks over, covering the ground with lava like a volcanic eruption. Shot with sorrow as Yi Shu, don't hesitate, focus your fire on that battle mage. That was when yelling erupted from Thunderclap's formation, and it seemed like it wasn't just one person. Don't fall for it everyone, I have 8 computers and I'm logged onto 8 alts. If I die I'll just switch alts, so killing me is a waste of time. Don't fall for the enemy's lies asterisk, Yi Shu yelled back. Enemies lies, my ass. We're all enemies, anyways. Huang Shaoxin, having been focus fired, somehow hadn't died and had hidden into some corner, but refused to give up the chance to speak. In Happy's training room, everyone was glancing at each other. What 8 computers? Whenever you open your mouth, all you say is bullshit and you manage to shit it out so fluently too. Peacebreaker is Shao Shiken, don't hesitate everyone. Focus that mechanic, Happy yelled in revenge. Don't fall for it everyone, I have 10 computers and I'm logged onto 10 alts, Shao Shiken yelled back. Ha 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 ha, Shao Shiken, are you trying to fool Void's Ghostblade duo asterisk? Your Thunderclap doesn't have enough extra computers for you, Yi Shu laughed. The pro players that had visited Thunderclap before thought for a moment. That was right, Thunderclap's training room didn't have so many free computers, so let's hurry and focus him. In that moment, there were some attacking Yi Shu, some attacking Shao Shiken, and some continuing to attack Huang Shaoxin. Under this situation, pro players were a target. Chapter 1087. Misdirect. The entire situation was in chaos. The guilds kept switching targets. The players felt as if there were numerous bosses out there. In reality, the real boss, the Dragon Swordsman, was still sitting peacefully in the center of the circle. Although it was chaotic, not a single attack actually hit the boss. It was clear that there was clear thinking and decision-making behind this madness. They all knew what would truly tip the scales of battle. They couldn't touch the Dragon Swordsman yet. Whoever did would become a target for everyone. With everyone so happily attacking all at once, whoever stood out and became a target would end up as minced meat. Thus, all the guilds hoped that someone else would make this mistake, but they found that all the other players were just as rational. Yi Shu's battle mage suddenly darted out from the crowd as if in a panic and came to a position where he stood out a lot. Killing gods was something everyone found enjoyable. It was just that after the first wave of attacks, everyone would be making sure to protect their own gods while they attacked others. As a result, it became more and more difficult to find their target. However, at this moment, Yi Shu's battle mage had exposed himself to the guilds. Don't hesitate. Everyone's attacks turned towards him. However, Yi Shu's battle mage was faster than a rabbit, darting off in another direction with a whoosh. He's going after the boss. Someone suddenly realized that Yi Shu's battle mage was about to step into the Dragon Swordsman's aggro range. Did he get careless? The pro players of each guild were delighted. Yi Shu had panicked and made a mistake. With him pulling the boss into this battle, the others didn't even need to discuss with each other. They would definitely all cooperate to kick Happy out of the competition first. He's in. He really charged in. The Dragon Swordsman moved. When sensing someone approaching, he would attack immediately. It seemed like Yi Shu had only just realized this, hastily swerving in a different direction. He's too late. As many thought this gleefully, the Dragon Swordsman had started attacking. Then, everyone saw him jump up high with an impressive collapsing mountain directed right at Guild Thunderclap. What the fuck? Guild Thunderclap panicked, but Shao Shiken had realized something was wrong ever since Yi Shu swerved towards a different direction. F***CK, this was a misdirection. Shao Shiken felt like crying. Since they were all impatient to kill off Yi Shu, some of Thunderclap's attacks had hit the Dragon Swordsman when Yi Shu's battle mage had swerved. Even though Yi Shu's battle mage had gotten into the boss's aggro range first, that aggro was nothing compared to the aggro pulled by directly attacking the boss. As the Dragon Swordsman crashed his way into their formation, the other guilds immediately took the chance to add to their misfortune. Explaining would do nothing. Xiao Shikan knew this. Xiao Shikan wouldn't believe that such an obvious misdirection could be missed by the experts presiding over each guild today. However, these guys would all go with the flow at a time like this. They'd pretend to not understand the reality of the situation and instead cooperate with the boss to send Thunderclap out of the competition as was convenient. Xiao Shikan felt dejected. Why did Yi Shu misdirect the boss to Thunderclap and not the other guilds? Why didn't I think of misdirecting the boss before Yi Shu did? Prepare to retreat. Thunderclap wouldn't be able to endure the combined assault of the boss and the other guild's harassment, so Xiao Shikan resolutely gave the order to retreat. With this chaos, another guild immediately tried to cut in and take over the situation. Ghost boundaries, set. Void would never lack ghost blades, and under the command of the number 1 phantom demon, Li Zan, all the ghost blades charged forth. It didn't matter if they were sword demons or phantom ghosts, all of them summoned their ghost boundaries. In an instant, phantasmic power spread across the field. Void's ghost blades must have undergone special training for this. Currently, the ghost boundaries covered the field and very few overlapped. A huge area had been locked down all at once. Because of a team's core classes, the guilds would usually have a majority of players playing specific classes. The surplus of a single class was a pain in dungeons, but in PvP, they could also easily find ways to execute unique team attacks using their advantage in numbers of a certain class. For example, the current Void Walk had covered such a large area with ghost boundaries. None of the elites in the other guilds could achieve this, they didn't have so many ghost blades. Although they might not have ghost blades, they had other classes. That was when the witches of Tiny Herb came forth, launching attacks as one. Lava flasks were thrown everywhere and magic rays crisscrossed in a wide net. Blade Masters, charge. Bluebrook wouldn't be left in the dust either. With a single command, their most abundant class, the Blade Masters, charged into the fray courageously as a single group, using triple slash to dart right in with extreme speed. Their warlocks, only slightly fewer than their Blade Masters, directly opened up a circle of death's doors. HMPH, we've been expecting this. Blossom Valley's people entered the battle fearlessly as well. Not only were their Spitfires numerous, but they all liked to imitate their ex-captain, Zhang Zhao's 100 Blossom style. They might not be as skilled, but the combined chaos of so many people sending out skills created some impressive lighting. How chaotic, Yi Shu commented from the sidelines. When he had charged up to misdirect the boss, he had given Happy an order. In that instant, not only did Happy abstain from attacking Thunderclap, they retreated even faster than Thunderclap. Thus, as the other 4 guilds went with the flow and clashed in an intense battle, Happy had pulled out and became spectators. Yi Shu looked over the raging battle before glancing at Happy's formation. A new guild like them didn't have such obvious class differences. Though Yi Shu's unspecialized was a very tempting choice, it was extremely hard to train up an unspecialized in these times. No normal game expert could complete the Heavenly Domain challenge at level 50. Now, the level limit had gone up by another 5 levels, so the Heavenly Domain challenge had become even harder, but unspecialized characters would still have to complete it at level 50. The possibility of being able to train up an unspecialized had dropped again. The other guilds noticed that Happy had quietly retread, waiting to benefit from the aftermath. They could only grit their teeth though. They couldn't do anything. They had already sent arrows flying, so there was no turning back. It wouldn't be feasible to even try and get everyone to turn their fire on Happy now. After all, they fighting were in groups of hundreds of people, it wasn't so easy to pull back and stop. Save your strength, all 4 guilds had the same thought. With that, defense became the main focus of the battle and the pace of the battle slowed immensely. Seeing this, they realized that this wasn't too bad. If they slowly came to a stop, it wouldn't be impossible to turn their fire on Happy. Should they make a pact? Right now, the different guilds had clashed, they wanted to cooperate with each other, but they were also terrified that someone would only pretend to cooperate and take the chance to strike. This was quite the conflict. Guild wars were even more complicated than pro battles sometimes. At the very least, this sort of chaotic all-out brawl wouldn't happen in a pro match. In a pro match, it was clear who were enemies and who were allies, unlike guild wars where an ally might turn their back on you in the next moment. These guilds were still debating their next arrangements when a flash of sword energy flew out, parting the crowd. The dragon swordsman then charged out of the encirclement. Everyone was shocked. The dragon swordsman wasn't programmed to run away. Could it be that someone stole the aggro? Everyone turned to look and saw that, in the direction the dragon swordsman was heading, there was a launcher, cannon shouldered, directing blast after blast at the dragon swordsman. It was only until the dragon swordsman was almost on top of them that they began to retreat. However, no player's movement speed was good enough to kite a boss, or else they'd be far too easy to kill. A few steps away from the launcher, the dragon swordsman raised his sword and flung out a Spellblade's Ice Wave sword towards the launcher. The speed of the skill was enough to get any Spellblade player drooling. But this launcher reacted extremely fast. With a jump, twist and blast from the cannon, the character rapidly switched directions, dodging the Ice Wave sword. Launcher. The number 1 launcher of the Alliance had already gone to Happy. Apart from a player at Su Mucheng's skill level, how many people could manage to accurately cause enough damage to steal a boss's aggro under such chaos? But if you do this, aren't you just pulling even more aggro for Happy? Thunderclap had only hit the dragon swordsman because of Yishu's misdirection, but hadn't managed to pull much aggro. Just Void's Ghost Boundary Net was enough to grab the aggro. Even so, at a time like this, no one was willing to take the boss's aggro. They had to control the situation first. They would only start trying to deal the most damage when the situation was stable. The boss's aggro was like a ticking time bomb. No one wanted it. So after Void grabbed the aggro, they quickly misdirected it towards Tiny Herb, who had launched a fierce offensive. Tiny Herb was rather generous, shoving the aggro at Blue Rain. Blue Rain was even worse, dodging it entirely and misdirecting it at 100 Blossoms. Seeing that this wasn't very good, 100 Blossoms threw it back to Void. Going back and forth like this, trying to cheat one another, was because no one wanted to establish a solid hold on the aggro then. That was why Su Mucheng managed to pull the boss away so easily. However, her purposeful stealing of the aggro was very different from the misdirections that had occurred between everyone before. With the boss getting pulled away, it was enough for the guilds to come to a ceasefire and charge over with no need of further prompting. The dragon swordsman still wanted to chase after Su Mucheng's launcher, and naturally, Happy's members would come and help prevent the boss from doing this. The other guilds quickly arrived, ready to send their own attacks. But that was when they saw the positioning of Happy's members. The pro players present were stunned. This positioning was like a super misdirection formation. If the guilds launched their attack, the dragon swordsman would probably immediately turn his attention back to them. Happy had used the fact that none of the guilds wanted the aggro to turn the dragon swordsman into a shield for them to use. However, could this really work? The guilds also had experts here. If they couldn't even deal with this, then they wouldn't be called experts. Immediately, the guilds had their members stop before rapidly rearranging their formation. But that was when Happy's members scattered and the dragon swordsman began to charge over like an uncaged tiger. What the hell? No one attacked it, did they? Everyone was shocked. Then, someone noticed what had happened and wanted to cry. When had Su Mucheng gotten behind them? Happy had been using the dragon swordsman as a shield and now they were using the other guilds as a shield. There were many pro players here, but after being played so many times, they had to admit that Yishu's knowledge and decision-making when commanding in these sorts of situations had gone far beyond them due to his full year of experience in the online game. Chapter 1088. Disparity. A 5v5 confrontation is absolutely not the same thing as a 100v100 battle. Although pro players were admittedly very skilled, much better than the average player, they only had the background of a pro. On the other hand, Yishu's year and a half of madness in the online game, frequently fighting and stealing bosses had greatly increased his skill level in this aspect, revealing a great disparity. Pro players admittedly had a higher level of tactical understanding, but on this kind of stage, they weren't necessarily better than the club guild leaders at maintaining balance and control. In situations like these, pro players relied more on their overwhelming ability in order to stop their opponents from seeing their plans to fruition, and using their skill to directly tear their enemies apart. Except now, hidden within the opponent's army was an individual of unparalleled skill in online battles, Yishu. This gap was one that they had no way of closing at the moment. Dragon Swordsman Knight directly charged at Su Mucheng's launcher, charging into a few groups of guild troops. As they charged, their hands did not stay still, instead swinging their swords wildly left and right. It was as if these few guilds had drawn the aggro of an Oded boss. What made this more awkward was the fact that, although they had no way of controlling this situation, they also couldn't just sit around and do nothing. Su Muqing's launcher was still moving, leading the dragon swordsman through the opposing armies to dish out damage and kill. Focus fire on Su Muqing? It wasn't as if they hadn't thought of this, but launchers possessed the greatest range. It wouldn't be easy to focus fire on her location. Furthermore, with a controller as skilled as Su Muqing, this wasn't really realistic. Charge it Happy. At this moment, no one was sure who suddenly came forth with this idea, directly shouting this out from within the crowd. The people who heard it thought it sounded reasonable. They immediately ignored He Dragon Swordsman and charged towards the players of Guild Happy. However, Happy's players had long prepared for this. As soon as they saw that several of the guilds were planning to join forces to attack them, they immediately turned and ran without another word. Moreover, they split up as they ran. Their entire army had dispersed at a moment's notice, throwing everything into disorder. At a time like this, should they chase or not chase? Who should they chase? How far should they chase? All of the pro players once again felt very confused, not knowing what to do. It was the guild leaders of the various guilds who, incomparably experienced when it came to these battles, seeing that Happy appeared to want to lure them away, immediately frantically went to check on the location of the boss. Because of the careful avoidance of these few guilds, the dragon swordsman charged outwards from amidst their troops, continuing to throw himself straight at Su Muqing's launcher. As for Su Muqing's launcher? At this moment she had indeed run very far away. Sure enough, she was trying to bring the boss away. Watch the boss. Pull it back. Every single one of the large guilds panicked. They hadn't come here to battle with Happy. What was the point of fighting for this long if the boss was going to be stolen away like this? This was the bad thing about wild bosses, they weren't like normal bosses, which were restricted to a certain area. Those bosses, if brought too far away, would automatically reset and return to their areas. But for wild bosses, the whole map could be seen as their permitted movement area. If you had the capability to continuously drag the boss around without being hacked to death, then you could take it to travel the entire world. Once the various guilds noticed that Happy was trying to steal Dragon Swordsman, how could they just ignore it? Outputting damage to pull back the aggro wasn't something that could be done in just the blink of an eye. At a time like this, they obviously had to rely on Knight's aggro skills to forcefully control the boss. For a moment, Knights charged forward from every guild, all using Provoke against the Dragon Swordsman. The effects of Provoke could override another instance of the same skill. All of these players fired off this skill at once, and for a moment, no one could tell whose skill had ultimately taken effect. In short, Dragon Swordsman charged back like a fiend. Every guild hastily adjusted their knight's rhythm, methodologically trying to establish control. Seeing that her purpose had not been achieved, Su Muqing once again fired back, bombing indiscriminately from afar. But if one was truly talking about generating aggro without taking damage output into account, then knights were the one class that generated the most aggro. With the addition of specialized aggro control skills, their advantage in this respect was unparalleled among the classes. Although a vast majority of the knight players present could in no way compete with Su Muqing, let's not forget that there were also pro players present. Currently, Xu Bin was the number one knight player in the alliance, and so naturally he was also the one who stood out most among the knights. Ultimately, it was him who pulled the aggro of Dragon Swordsman. Thus, Dragon Swordsman target became Herb Garden. This wasn't a situation that Tiny Herb wanted to see. Fortunately, the aggro currently on Xu Bin was only because of a CC skill, so it wasn't stable. Should they release it once again? Xu Bin was at a loss. They had pulled it back, but now they wanted both to release it and to not release it. This kind of back and forth, what did it mean? He couldn't seem to figure it out himself. Kill Su Muqing first? Someone had thought of this, but when they took a look at the situation again, Su Muqing fired a few shots and then started running as if she had given up. However, Xu Bin, who was keeping the boss's aggro under control, was very clear that the boss's aggro was still on Su Muqing's launcher. If he released the boss would immediately run in that direction. However, if he didn't and established the aggro, wouldn't Herb Garden become the target of everyone? At this time Xu Bin felt embarrassed, not knowing how to proceed. Release. In the end, it was still Wang Jiaxi who made the decision. Not releasing would be unfortunate for their herb garden, but releasing the boss would at least bring misfortune to all of the other guilds too. Shu Bin released the boss, and the dragon swordsman charged out. All the surrounding knights all stood stupidly, not knowing how to proceed. For now, none of them wanted the aggro of the boss, yet they also couldn't just let Happy lead it away. They couldn't block, but they also couldn't not block. Then, what should they do? Follow the boss, and push Happy away. Finally, someone came out with a suggestion. The dragon swordsman was currently chasing after Su Mucheng. There was no way her launcher could single-handedly lead the boss along forever. The other side would definitely need to send people to block the dragon swordsman in order to buy her some time. Couldn't they then just chase after the boss, while also seizing the chance to roll over Happy? As a result, they all swarmed, charging forward. On Happy's side, everyone also swarmed, helping Su Mucheng buy time. They actually managed to utilize the strength of the entire guild. Both sides thoroughly collided at last. At this moment, Herb Garden, Blue Brook Guild, Blossom Valley, and Void Walk felt that they had a common enemy, surprisingly banding together to fight against Happy. Happy's players were put on defense, yet they were still unable to withstand the combined offensive of these four guilds. When it came to the strength of normal players, they were inferior to these professional guilds. Not good. As a result, these guilds bullied Happy with glee, only to suddenly discover that even as Happy's players risked everything in order to defend their position, the dragon swordsman had already been led even further away. Already, they had lost sight of Su Mucheng's launcher. The dragon swordsman's silhouette also disappeared behind the mountainside in the blink of an eye. Within the four guilds, normal players and pros alike broke into chaos. How could they continue to pay attention to the players from Happy in front of them? So this giant crowd was just a distraction after all. Now, Dragon Swordsman had completely escaped from their frame of view. What corner would he be dragged off to now, to be secretly killed? Several hundred people hurried chased over, only to realize that the mountain was far too tall, and the earth far too vast. It was as if the Dragon Swordsman had never spawned at all. Where would they even begin to search? The various guilds scattered their troops, dispatching them to go search. As for the pro players, they all seemed a bit lost. They couldn't figure out how Happy had led the dragon swordsman away, just like that. This would need a thorough tactical analysis. The pro players naturally pondered the problem from their customary point of view. Just like when they carefully reviewed their opponent's strategies after a match, they felt that the situation that had just come to pass should also be analyzed thus. The online game was extremely easy for pro players since they didn't have any opponents at their level. However, when an opponent at a high skill level appeared, then the game became quite a bit more complicated than even normal pro matches. None of the players that had been sent out to search for the Dragon Swordsman had brought back any news, right up until the point where the system announced that the Dragon Swordsman had been slain by Guild Happy. As for where this had occurred, and who had participated, the club guilds surprisingly had no clue. Everyone present was dejected, gloomily going through the motions of cleaning up in the aftermath. Those who could respawn did so, and any dropped equipment was picked up. In this process, it was difficult to avoid altercations with the other guilds. Still, no large-scale confrontations occurred. These players all had habits acquired through years of works, and they normally wouldn't argue over such small issues. The aftermath of a boss being stolen felt like the aftermath of a professional match. Continuing to fight seemed completely pointless. After all, they were all guilds that had grown so large. Killing each other wasn't going to destroy a guild. For example, after Samsara's championship victory last year, Blue Brook Guild and Guild Samsara had engaged in a brutal conflict, the fires of war spreading throughout the world of glory from guild members to wild fans alike. The result? It could only be said that both sides had suffered. After all, this was an online game, a character that died could respawn in the blink of an eye. It was true that equipment could drop, but it could also be picked up, turning into a back and forth cycle of you drop I pick and vice versa. Ultimately, which side profited? Neither, because in the end both sides would suffer losses. Only some lucky passerbyers stood to gain. Thus, these kinds of battles were something the guild managers tried to avoid at all costs. It was only after important competitions, when the fans felt the need to vent, that the guilds felt compelled to stand firmly beside them. Even though they knew very well that this was not the sensible thing to do, they didn't really have a choice. They could only think of it as a tax of sorts to the fans. But now, they had simply lost a wild boss, and their feelings were unlikely to be that strong. The various players all felt a bit like they couldn't really compete against Yi Shu, yet the guild leaders were all desensitized at this point. Bringing in the cream of the crop to compete against Yi Shu, and still losing the wild boss to Happy? Wasn't this just another day in glory? Except, their guild had now brought pro players into the game as well. How come Happy could still so easily carry out their plans? This question was one that the various players from the club guilds couldn't really find an answer to. In their eyes, pro players were in a completely different league. Whether they hadn't played the online game for a long time, or had only played a little, Yi Shu's presence for the past year and a half was a very valid reason for their failures. But they had completely neglected this battle. Just when would they win? Means traveling to many different countries, but it also refers to the travels of Confucius during the spring and autumn period of China's history. From age 55 to 68, Confucius brought a few of his close disciples touring the area around what is now Shandong. He even planned on heading to some of the more western countries, but couldn't due to the political climate. Chapter 1089. Dragon Spine Marrow. What dropped? An elite member from Happy's guild gave the last hit to kill the boss, Dragon Swordsman. At this moment, he was standing around the Dragon Swordsman's corpse, looking nervously and expectantly at the materials scattered all over the ground. Guan Rongfei's addition to the team put Happy's equipment development in the right track. Although he wanted to focus more on the Myriad Manifestations umbrella, after being in this line of work for so many years, he was still very clear on what his responsibilities were. All of Happy's silver equipment would be developed by him alone. Guan Rongfei had already come up with several ideas based on Happy's current materials. And Happy's vast amounts of level 75 uncommon materials broadened his horizons. Happy couldn't compare with Excellent Era in terms of level 70 and below materials. Happy couldn't compare with other club guilds in terms of level 75 normal materials either. However, for level 75 uncommon materials, Happy instantly stood out. In the level 75 update, Happy had established their position in the Heavenly Domain Wild Bosses battlefield. Their allies, Heavenly Justice, Radiant, Parade, and Conquering Clouds, had considerably fatter guild storages as well. And once Wu Chen joined and the guild had gradually grown, the guild drew less and less from the other four guilds, focusing on enriching their own guild storage. For the other guilds, their materials were like a pyramid, the more high-end the material the fewer there was. But for Happy, it couldn't be said that it was completely the opposite, but at least relatively speaking, their guild storage outdid the other club guilds. A professional like Guan Rongfei knew very clearly what this implied. This meant that although the overall number of silver equipment possessed by Happy might not be able to catch up to the powerhouses in a short amount of time, Happy might not lose to any other guild in terms of level 75 silver equipment. Don't look at how the other guilds already had level 75 silver equipment, while Happy had none. That was only because Happy didn't have many level 70 silver equipment. Happy also didn't have a professional like Guan Rongfei working for them. Wei Chen and Yi Shu. Wei Chen's knowledge was mostly limited to his warlock class. Most of it was through experience. He lacked the theoretical foundation, so it was difficult for him to deduce many things from one case. As for Yi Shu, his knowledge base was broader than Wei Chen's, but his time was limited. Just a single Myriad Manifestations umbrella was already making his head dizzy. He also needed to study strategies, watch over the growth of his players, and deal with in-game matters. He really couldn't handle everything. As a result, for their level 75 silver equipment, Yi Shu just didn't bother spending any of his time and efforts into this area. But with Guan Rongfei here, Yi Shu was now completely free from this area. With a professional like him, the progress towards their equipment sped up considerably. After Guan Rongfei received the information on the Myriad Manifestations umbrella, he really wanted to hurry up and upgrade this equipment. He had all sorts of other crazy ideas too. For this Dragon Swordsman, Guan Rongfei had a clear request. Dragon Spine Marrow. This was the name of the material that Guan Rongfei requested. Happy originally had 4 pieces of this material, but Guan Rongfei had expressed that the amount was far from enough. 4 isn't enough? How many do you need? Yi Shu asked. The umbrella ribs, Guan Rongfei replied. Umbrella ribs. Guan Rongfei's boldness surpassed Yi Shu's imagination. The umbrella ribs were the frame that supported the umbrella. It required a rather high quantity of materials. This part had always been made using normal materials. However, Guan Rongfei was domineering. This guy actually wanted to use uncommon materials here. Was he planning on using only level 75 uncommon materials for every part of the Myriad Manifestations umbrella? Isn't that too extravagant? Is there a need? Yi Shu was a bit doubtful. Uncommon materials were usually used for a few important parts of a silver equipment. There had never been a case where a silver equipment was completely made up of only uncommon material. It has to be. Guan Rongfei was certain. The structure of this piece of equipment is extremely complex. It can't compare to other equipment. Along the way, you've probably already noticed that it needed more uncommon materials at higher levels. This is because if the quality of the material isn't raised, getting such a complex structure to improve to a higher level isn't possible. Are you sure this is the only reason? And not because our level 75 uncommon material reserves are still good, so you wanted to create a beautiful piece of silver equipment composed of entirely uncommon materials? Yi Shu asked questioningly. That's only the third reason, Guan Rongfei said. Third reason? This guy really had this kind of thought. Yi Shu really wanted to very politely give this guy a scolding, but Guan Rongfei followed. There's the second reason. This way is relatively economical. Economical? Yi Shu felt like he had heard wrong. Yes, if you insist on using common materials, that's fine too, but this will undoubtedly require more research into the other options. The amount of materials needed for the Myriad Manifestations umbrella is already several times that of other equipment. The other options make things even more complicated. There are far more types of common material than uncommon material. If the choice of a common material turns out to be a mistake, then the amount of waste produced overall will be many times greater than other equipment. Guan Rongfei spoke frankly and confidently when he talked about equipment. It was a completely different attitude than when he talked about anything else. Yi Shu felt like this was very logical. In the end, it was because level 75 materials had only been around for half a year, not like level 70 materials that had been studied for 3 years now. In addition, the Myriad Manifestations umbrella was exceptionally complex. An unprecedented upgrade like for this umbrella was much more difficult. However, is it really necessary to use all uncommon materials? Yi Shu said. I think it's more dependable this way, Guan Rongfei said. Are there enough level 75 materials to upgrade the Myriad Manifestations umbrella? Yi Shu asked. There were currently 8 level 75 wild bosses. No matter how high their efficiency was, their production rate wouldn't be able to compare with level 70 uncommon materials. There were around 20 level 70 wild bosses. Don't look down on uncommon materials, Guan Rongfei said solemnly. Then I'll listen to you. What are your thoughts right now? Yi Shu asked. As a result, Yi Shu received a list of materials that Guan Rongfei needed. Because of their half a year of accumulation, they already met quite a few of the requirements. It was just this dragon spine marrow. 12. When Guan Rongfei said he needed 12, it was as if this task was as easy as obtaining 12 lighters. Shouldn't there only be 8 umbrella ribs? Yi Shu asked. But if it's dragon spine marrow, then I need 12. Guan Rongfei's reply practically said nothing, but Yi Shu understood that Guan Rongfei meant that this material would be different than past materials, whether that was in length or bulk, which required 12 instead of 8 to accomplish. Don't look down on uncommon materials? Yi Shu took Guan Rongfei's statement and asked it back to him. It's worth the money, Guan Rongfei said. And now, the dragon swordsman had finally fallen. As for the dragon spine marrow, was there any? They were missing 8 pieces still. This boss only spawned once a week and it wasn't guaranteed that they would kill it every time. Even if they did, it wasn't a guaranteed drop. How long had it been since Yi Shu had looked forward to boss drops? This time, he deeply felt it. Materials were scattered all over the ground. Wu Chen sucked in a deep breath of air and then began picking up the drops. Right now, he was a permanent resident of the game. The others only logged onto alternates and joined when they were needed. More often than not, they were on their mains and practicing in the arena. Several practice routines had been implemented into the dedicated program that Guan Rongfei had created. Compared to the past, they didn't need to go into the game and look for the correct environment anymore. Item after item flashed in the team chat every time he picked up a drop. Jade cloud sand, burning heaven cloth, mountain and sea ice. Drop after drop jumped up in everyone's eyes. These were all valuable level 75 uncommon materials, but at this moment, no one cared about them. Finally, everyone saw the 3 words that they were looking for. Dragon spine marrow. Chen Guo was the first to shout. They were still missing 7. Another one, Chen Guo yelled again. A large number of materials usually dropped, so it wasn't rare for several of a single type of material to drop. Everyone wished that all 8 dragon spine marrow would drop all at once. 3. Chen Guo called out again, but her shout wasn't as fast as Yi Shu's click. The moment that she shouted, everyone saw that 2 dragon spine marrows had popped up on screen. A total of 4 dragon spine marrows had dropped. Are there any more? Everyone was staring at the ground. There weren't many materials left. Wu Chen continued to click rapidly. The numerous materials scattered on the floor were quickly swept clean. Chen Guo's counting hadn't been able to keep up with his speed. After 3 shouts, she closed her mouth. Everyone was looking at the team chat. Another one and then another one. Could all 8 actually drop? Wei Chen was stunned. Reality wasn't that crazy. In the end, 6 had dropped. D** Minnesota, only 6, Yi Shu sighed. Everyone was speechless. Due to how often they hunted wild bosses, they had a good understanding of the drop rate of wild bosses. It wasn't rare for 2 or 3 of the same materials to drop. 4 or 5 was rather rare, but it seemed to be their first time getting 6 of the same drop at once. He shouldn't feel sad about that, and there definitely shouldn't have been an only attached to it. Once their harvest ended, Yi Shu and the others logged off. Wu Chen took the materials along with the other guild members back to the city and continued to do his work. This summer definitely wouldn't be a relaxing one. Yi Shu opened up a file. It contained all of the material needs that Guan Rongfei had requested. Yi Shu changed dragon spine marrows from 8 to 2. Just this change alone wasn't able to block the dazzling list contained in this file. Chapter 1090. A summer not to be overlooked. Yi Shu couldn't help but sigh at the list of materials sent by Guan Rongfei. If this list had been sent to any other club guild, it wouldn't have just been a sigh. A huge storm definitely would have erupted. Failing to get a wild boss was a common occurrence for any club guild, but frequently losing to a single guild somewhat broke the balance. And this imbalance had lasted for a year and a half already. Happy might not be completely monopolizing all of the wild bosses, but their profits this past year and a half far surpassed any other powerhouse. This was an undeniable reality. When the clubs did an inventory of their storages at the end of Season 9, the guild departments all presented unsatisfactory reports. There were only so many wild bosses. One more wild boss won by that guild was one less wild boss for this guild. And now, Happy had taken so many wild bosses away. With just the remaining wild bosses, how could there be enough for any of them to reach their expected goals? The guild departments were embarrassed. Their bosses had unsightly expressions. However, their bosses couldn't scold them too harshly. It was no secret how powerful Guild Happy was. Guild Happy had a god like Yi Shu watching over. If their guild leader could beat Yi Shu, then their guild leader would have been promoted to the team long ago to win the championships. Their only consolation was that their losses weren't special cases. Their other competitors were also knitting their brows over this issue. During this year and a half, they had tried all sorts of methods to solve this problem. When the level 75 update came around, they even had their pro players rush into the game to increase their competitiveness without regard for their pro players' conditions. The effectiveness of the pro players joining in was very clear, but it wasn't absolute. After the update, it was still Guild Happy that led the pack. For example, their defeat at the battle for the Dragon Swordsman was not a unique case. It wasn't the first time that Happy had taken down the boss from the hands of other pro players. It was just that in this battle, there were top tacticians like Yu Wenzhou, Xiao Shikan, and Wang Jiexi participating. These tacticians had distinctly felt a reality: they couldn't keep up with Yi Shu's tempo in these in-game battles. Why is that? These experts instantly figured it out. Even though they also stood at the top of glory, they had been separated from the game for a long time. They still held an extremely large advantage when clashing against normal players, but when facing an equally skilled player like Yi Shu, this difference only became more obvious. Although a bit exaggerated, one analogy would be that they were like noobs being beaten by an expert with far more experience than them. This was certainly an awkward situation. The guild players had in-game experience, but they weren't as skilled as Yi Shu. The pro players had the skill, but they lacked the experience in large-scale wild boss battles. This wasn't a minor issue. Happy's dominance was somewhat inevitable. After the Dragon Swordsman battle, the participating guilds were all deeply reflecting on this issue. Right now, it was summer break in the league. For the pro players, this break was an official holiday. The clubs didn't have the legal right to demand them to do anything. They also had no obligation to undertake these in-game tasks. Even more importantly, helping out in the game was to improve their team's strength. However, with the summer transfer window open, players might very well switch to another team. Consequently, players without too stable of a position would find it difficult to improve their team's hardware. They would rather improve their own individual skill and improve what could be regarded as their software. Every player had their own thoughts, but no matter the case, every player was chasing after their dream for glory. For Team Thunderclap, their players didn't seem to have any apprehensions about getting transferred away. They didn't even go back home this summer and instead stayed to help out the team. For Team Tiny Herb and Team Blue Rain, they had talented rookies with lots of room to grow. They didn't want to waste these 2 months of the summer, so they made training their rookies the name of the game. Both rookies were training intensely and receiving pointers from their respective teammates. For Team 100 Blossoms, after rebuilding the team and experiencing a series of trials, they had finally walked out from their lowest point. Even though they had lost in the playoffs to Tyranny, everyone could see the fighting spirit of the new Team 100 Blossoms. They were filled with ambition towards the new season. The day after being eliminated from the playoffs, they had already started preparing for the new season. When Team Tyranny lost to Team Samsara in the finals, Zhang Jiali, who had come out of retirement and joined Team Tyranny, inevitably received hate from a few Team 100 Blossom fans, but it was less than what people had expected. This was because more fans were invested in the new Team 100 Blossoms. The fans had walked away from the past, looking forward to the new Team 100 Blossoms' future. Apart from that, there were other teams too. For Team Tyranny, the old generals hadn't given up yet. Would Season 10 be their last chance? No one knew the answer to that. Team Tyranny themselves might not know either, but they would treat it like their last chance and do everything they could because they could already feel that time was mercilessly dragging them from this world little by little. They needed to treasure every minute, every second. They definitely wouldn't let 2 months of vacation wear away their fighting spirit. For Team Samsara, while people were still in celebration over the defending champions, the team had snatched excellent eras Sun Shang and Battle God 1 Autumn Leaf at lightning speed. Their determination for the new season could easily be seen from this. 3 consecutive championship victories was the mark of a new dynasty. Team Samsara was walking the road to an even greater glory. This summer, they wouldn't be resting either. For Team Wind Howl, astonishing everyone became a common occurrence, getting them to 3rd place in the regular season. They had progressed into the semi-finals, but were beaten cleanly by Samsara and eliminated from the playoffs. Losing to the eventual champions couldn't be considered shameful, but for these proud and ambitious youths, this season had been like a tiger's head but a snake's tail. A loss was a loss. Even if others sympathized and forgave them, they didn't feel good about it at all. They wanted wins from start to finish. There was also Misty Rain, Void, 301, Royal Style, Conquering Clouds, Radiant, and Parade. With Glory's Season 10, the Glory competitive scene will have been around for 10 years. It would the first complete season with level 75s. Every team seemed to have a reason for not losing. Every team appeared to be more proactive. Because of their burning fighting spirit, this summer would blaze even more intensely. Another level 75 wild boss battle. This was the focal point of the club guilds. It directly affected upgrading their team's silver equipment to level 75. If Yi Shu had a list of materials from Guanrongfei, how could the other guilds not have their own list? Barrier Mountains, Shadow Commander San, a boss that mainly dropped Nightwalker class equipment and Nightwalker materials. Team Blue Rain's Warlock, Swaksar. Team Blue Rain's Ninja, Dark Forest. Team Wind Howl's Thief, Doubtful Demon. Team 301's Assassin, Scene Killer. These 4 Nightwalker class all-stars were undoubtedly their team's core. The Shadow Commander San were their biggest priorities. Apart from that, there was Samsara, Void, Thunderclap, and so on. These teams all had Nightwalker classes as part of their main roster and wouldn't miss this opportunity. As for Happy, they had 2 Nightwalkers, Wei Chen's Warlock, Windward Formation, and Mo Fan's Ninja, Deception. At a mountain stream in Barrier Mountains, Shadow Commander San spawned. A mantle covered his body. He seemed to blend into the shadows as he walked along the cliff. When the guilds received the news, they quickly crammed into the mountain stream. But when they saw the terrain, their heads immediately started hurting. To the left and right of the mountain stream were high cliffs. There was no way to arrange any proper formations. The mountain stream itself wasn't wide enough. There was only enough space for one group to fight with the boss, but right now, there were 1, 2, 3, 4. F***CK, there's more groups than can be counted. Everyone was grumbling to themselves. Their guild leaders all kept silent because they were only the leaders in name. With the pro players watching over them, they tactfully stepped down to give them the authority, especially when the pro player was the captain. Captain Yu, this isn't a good place to fight. At Blue Brook Guild, guild leader Changing Springs was currently discussing the situation with Captain Yu Wenzhou. Yu Wenzhou replied. His left hand was tapping the edge of his keyboard. He was also pondering over their situation. Huang Shaoshan wasn't as quiet. He had dragged along Lu Hanwen, and the 2 blade masters had gone into hiding to who knew here. The only thing that Yu Wenzhou could hear was Huang Shaoshan's voice rattling on from outside the game. This time, we have to stay calm. We can't reveal our identities so easily. Yi Shu is a very despicable player. As soon as he finds out it's us, he'll definitely try to kill us as fast as possible. It's just like last time. You know, Huang Shaoshan was currently lecturing Lu Hanwen. Senior, last time it was just you who revealed yourself, no? Who are you talking about when you say, we? Lu Hanwen asked. Excuses. If you don't concentrate, he'll easily see through you, Huang Shaoshan scolded. But, he doesn't seem to be here? I don't see Guild Happy, Lu Hanwen said. HMPH, impossible, Huang Shaoshan snorted, he was just asking me on QQ where I was. He's definitely here. He's just hiding, that's all. Oh, I get it, Lu Hanwen nodded his head, even if he wasn't originally going to be here, since you replied to him, telling him where you were, he'll definitely be on his way. What? Huang Shaoshan stared blankly. Something didn't seem right with this logic? Hanwen. Huang Shaoshan spoke with heartfelt sincerity, you know, my hands are incomparably fast. They move much faster than my mind. When I play, it's like that. Sometimes, by the time I realize what the problem is, it's like that too. I get it. No wonder our captain often stresses that you need to control your hand speed. Lu Hanwen said. Ha ha ha, that's because he doesn't have this problem, Huang Shaoshan laughed out loud. The captain's looking at us. Lu Hanwen had noticed that Yu Wenzhou seemed to be interested in their conversation. Shut up. Focus. Do you know what focus means, Lu Hanwen? Huang Shaoshan shouted loudly.